What's up, y'all? Welcome to another installment of the For the Gram podcast. This is the show where I, Jaksyn, your host, am going to dive into a topic of interest to me. This could be a current event, something that's like a hip trend out there, but at the bottom line, it's going to be a thing relevant enough for the gram. This episode, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite things in the world that I referred to a couple episodes ago. I love baseball. And this episode is going to be a lot about baseball. So this week specifically is All Star Week. So if you're unfamiliar with the sports world, about halfway through the season in both the NBA, the NHL, and also the MLB, they have this area of time called All Star Week, where they basically give most of the players a week off, but throughout the earlier parts of the season, they hold votes for who people think are the better players in the league. And so that is where we get All Star Week from, is the fans vote for who the All-Stars of the league are. And during All-Star Week, they have what's called the All-Star Game, and that is the best of the best in the respective sport going against the best of the best. So this is really where you get to see people show off a lot. You get to see a bunch of crazy things in All-Star Week. The thing with the MLB that I love so much is there's an event called the Home Run Derby. If you don't know what the Home Run Derby is, this is my favorite thing about baseball. It's where they take 8 of the best players throughout the league, or at least that's what they used to do. Now they just have the All-Stars selections, and then the All-Stars get to pick whether they want to be in the Home Run Derby or not. But you basically take 8 players and you have them go against each other in a competition of who can hit the most home runs. And I think that's amazing. I love the Home Run Derby. If Minneapolis or Wisconsin or even Chicago hosts the All-Star Game, the All-Star Week, if you will, I need to go see the Home Run Derby at some point in my life just because it's crazy. You see these baseball players hitting home run after home run after home run, and you can catch a lot of them if you can get a souvenir ball from any event in baseball. The Home Run Derby is the one that most people are like, oh my gosh, I need this. It's on my list of things to do in the world of sports. I need to go to the Home Run Derby. This year, there are a lot of people who have never done the Home Run Derby before, so we have a lot of new faces in the Home Run Derby, and that's always cool to see. You don't want to see a lot of the older people hitting home runs year after year after year. But that being said, I do want to talk about, in the Home Run Derby, there's like some legacy to it, right? Because Ken Griffey Jr., a baseball player from a little while ago, he is known for winning 3 home run derbies during his tenure when he played baseball. And so this year, Pete Alonso, he's the first baseman for the Mets. He has the chance to go and tie this 3 derby wins, and I am all for it. I think he was aided a little bit in the sense that he got to play in Denver for one of his derbies. Alonso did, and if you don't know about Denver, the air is thinner, so the ball travels further, so it's easier to hit home runs there than it is anywhere else in the league. But I think he definitely has a shot to win it. Pete's definitely slowed up a lot over the years, but I definitely think he has a chance to win it, except this year there's a lot of young bucks playing for the first time. You have the 2 shortstops for the American League outside of Carlos Correa, who's a Twin, a little biased, but you have Gunnar Henderson, who plays for the Baltimore Orioles, and he was actually the first to say that he was going to play in the Home Run Derby. And then you also have Bobby Witt Jr., who plays for the Royals. I like him. He's very fast, but he's a Royal, so I can't say much good about him just because of my Twins bias. But those two are both playing in the Home Run Derby this year, and I'm excited to see what they do just because this is their first time in the Derby, and it's just going to be exciting. It's one of the days that I look most forward to every year. This year it's Monday, the 15th of July, so I'm so excited I get to watch it. They're making the rules more strict this year just because it's hard to hit home run after home run for 4 minutes straight. And so they're changing up the time of how long each person has to hit the ball. But I think it's going to be as fun as it always is to watch it. The thing with All Star games, so the Home Run Derby is Monday and the All Star game is Tuesday for baseball. The thing with the All Star game, though, is if you play really, really good baseball, not a lot is gonna happen, right? So if you have the best pitchers in the league going up against some of the best hitters in the league, you're eventually going to get to the point where not a lot is happening. So the All-Star game for baseball is not exactly that thrilling to watch, just because it's the best pitchers against the best hitters against the best fielders, and so you really don't have a lot of wiggle room in that sense. If you hit some bombs every now and again, that's cool to watch, but from my experience of watching the All-Star game, not a lot happens in it. It's a lot of waiting, it's a lot of I guess with the pitch clocks this year, we might make it easier to have a better game just because the pitcher has to go so quickly. But a lot of the time with the All-Star game for the MLB, it's a little boring to watch. Whereas if you watch the NBA All-Star game, that's going to be a lot flashier. There's the dunk contest before, which is not as good as the Home Run Derby, objectively speaking, just because of ratings and everything like that. But then the All-Star game itself is going to be a lot flashier because your players are going to be going crazy and they're going to be scoring a lot and they're going to have a lot of people who don't want to pass the ball. But the thing with the NBA is the players get to choose the teams for the All-Star break, and I think that's a cool thing too. But then you have the NHL All-Star game where they're just showing off as hockey players do sometimes when they get to be a little bit flashier. But I think the MLB All-Star game is fun to watch for me just because I'm a huge baseball guy, and this is the week for the best of the best to show off a little bit. But at the same time, I don't like the fact that the uniform concepts have to be different every year. This year, they don't look that great, if I'm being completely honest with you. They haven't looked that great for the past couple of years. There was one year in 2017, I think, when they had yellow jerseys, yellow uniforms, and I really liked that just because I'm a big yellow guy, but not a lot of people liked them, which is fine. I get that. But this year, they're just a little bland. I do like the fact that this year, if you're not a baseball person and you're watching the All-Star game and you don't know what team a player normally plays for, their logo is going to be on their hat, which I think is a beneficial thing about the All-Star game just because you're having a lot of different people from a lot of different teams on there. So a way for them to represent their team apart from being in the All-Star game is wearing their logo on their hat, which is cool. And it's also like a good recognizability thing for people who don't necessarily watch a lot of baseball. But then there are other leagues like the NFL who don't have an All-Star game. They have what's called the Pro Bowl, where they get a bunch of people voted on by the fans, obviously. So if you don't like who's participating in these events, just know they've been voted on, so it's just a majority thing. But with the Pro Bowl, I think it's stupid. The NFL does not have a very good grasp on this anymore, just because it's the week before the Super Bowl. Like, people don't try as much as they would if it was like a higher stakes thing. And that's always frustrating. They added the skills showdown a couple years ago, which I really like that part of it. That's just the athletes getting to show off a little bit, some of the stuff that they can do. And then you get to see players who wouldn't normally play with each other. There was one year where Russell Wilson and Adam Thielen were a pass catching duo, and they worked really well together. They had really good chemistry, but you would not ever get to see that in a normal game experience. But with the Pro Bowl in NFL, I think it's dumb. I think we shouldn't have it. There was a tweet the other day that one of my friends sent me that was Joe Burrow, who is the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. He said when the NFL eventually moves to an 18-game season, they need to have a second bye week. And during that second bye week, it would be like week 13, so the week after Thanksgiving and all that stuff. Then you have the Pro Bowl. And it would be like an NBA type thing, or an NHL type thing, or an MLB type thing, where it's in the middle of the season. And that way people actually want to try for it, as opposed to just a lot of people not wanting to play. And then you don't have to make it a flag football game anymore, and that would be okay. But then there's another option, which this is what I think the Pro Bowl should be. I think the worst two teams in the league should play each other, and the winner gets the number 1 overall draft pick. So if you failed miserably throughout the season and there's no shot you're going to get anybody in the Pro Bowl because your team isn't that great, you have a chance to show off a little bit in a game against the second worst team in the NFL. So you take the two bottom teams and you have them play each other, and you have to give it some stakes, otherwise they're just going to tank it. So the winner gets the number 1 overall draft pick for the next year. I think that would be a cool way to do it. Then people would actually be interested in watching it. So you have the team that gets the number 1 overall draft pick decided the week before you have the Super Bowl champion. I think that would be a really interesting way to go about that, and then it would make the Pro Bowl a lot less lackluster, a lot less boring to watch, and then you wouldn't have to just rely on the skills showdown to sell it. And I think that would make all the difference in that sort of a thing. But like All-Star games in general are just, they're a lot more laid back now than they used to be. Like, they used to be like a thing that people looked forward to, that like people would make a week out of it. They'd be like, okay, it's All-Star week, I gotta watch the All-Star game, I gotta like make sure my players are doing good and stuff like that. But in a show called The Office, there's an episode called Threat Level Midnight, which is a short film created by Steve Carell's character, Michael Scott, in The Office. And so it's a short film about a spy named Michael Scarn, and he is on a mission to save the NHL All Star game. And if you like see in one of the B-roll shots of the film, there's like newspaper clippings of like all these other All-Star games that he saves. And so he just goes through and he saves all of these All-Star games from exploding from explosives and stuff like that. And they're like, this one's personal. The president who's giving you the assignment, he owns the stadium. Like, I want stakes like that. Like, not that people are like gonna die or anything like that, but I want like elevated stakes for these All-Star games, just because they don't really mean as much as they used to. Like back then when they were filming The Office, it was probably just like a way to get people excited about All-Star games, or it was just a funny bit that they decided to put in there, but I don't really know. I liked Threat Level Midnight. It was good. It was a good short flick, but at the same time, I think it would be an interesting way. It was like I believe it was just an interesting way to elevate what they already were doing with the All-Star weeks and stuff like that. And I just think a lot of the All-Star games now are just boring. There's not a lot worth watching, and that's fine, I guess. I'm not like saying go watch the All-Star game because you're going to fall asleep, and that's going to be wonderful. But at the same time, I think the MLB All Star game is still probably my favorite, just because I know there's not a lot of scoring. I know that. But at the same time, you get to see some crazy plays by some of these athletes. Like, you see diving catches from outfielders, you see lasers thrown from pitcher to the catcher, things like that. And then they cycle out a lot of the time too. So normally in an MLB game, they would only it's called pinch hitting or pinch running, where they take a player of a certain position and they sub them out because someone's faster or someone's more likely to get a hit or something like that. They do that a lot more often in the All-Star game just because they want everybody to play. So they do cycle through the lineup a lot more than they normally would in the regular season. So I do like that aspect of it, because then I can tune in the 8th inning and see my boy Carlos Correa, shortstop for the Twins. I can see him hit like a bloop single over the head of the opponent's second baseman or something like that. That would be cool. At the same time, though, you don't really get to see a lot of different players at the same time, just because you do have your starting 9 and then your pitcher, so they do play a little bit more. So I think another cool thing about the All-Star game is, instead of making it a popularity contest, a lot of the time it is, like, the Phillies are the best team in baseball right now, the Philadelphia Phillies, and they have 7 people in the All-Star game, but they do try and have one representative from every team. So some of the teams that didn't get enough votes or things like that, like the Twins, they have one, and it's Carlos Correa. If Royce didn't miss 60 games at the beginning of the season, he would totally be in there. Royce Lewis, the third baseman for the Twins. But he's also hurt right now. That took a big dip in the votes too, is that people were just getting hurt. Like, a lot of the pressure of being this all-star athlete is you're putting your body on the line for the game. And so there were so many people that just ended up getting hurt. Like Kyle Schwarber, who was one of my favorite players in all of baseball right now. He is a outfielder for the Phillies, and he was voted in as a designated hitter, but everybody knows Shohei Ohtani, the biggest name in baseball right now. He was gonna win the designated hitter for the National League, but Kyle Schwarber, he got hurt as the second round of voting started, so people didn't vote for him because they knew he wasn't going to play. So they kind of sway you that way in terms of like injuries and stuff. And then a lot of the times, if you don't know the team, you're not going to really recognize a lot of the names, so you're not going to vote for them. So, like, there's a player for the San Francisco Giants named Elliot Ramos. He is an outfielder, and he is in his first year in the league. So if there weren't many outfielder injuries in the National League as there were, then there would be no light to shine on this guy who has been playing through the ringer all season just to, like, get a look at some of these, like, lower level players. I think that's a cool thing. Obviously, I don't, like, wish injury on anybody, but there's some cool players that get to shine through when you don't see the same people at the All Star game every year. And I was, like, paying very careful attention to the votes this year. I don't normally. I've only been voting for the All Star game the last couple of years, but for the designated hitter for the National League, like I was talking about, Kyle Schwarber and Shohei Ohtani. Shohei Ohtani plays for the Dodgers. He's from Japan. He's pretty cool. He's one of the best hitters in baseball right now, apart from Aaron Judge, but National League level. He's being paid $500 million a year. Like, it's insane. I think his contract is, like, it's a really high number. It's like $500 million for 10 years, so he gets paid $50 million a year. That's insane for a baseball player, and the Dodgers have two people that are paid that much money, and so that just tells you how cracked up the cap is in baseball, which it's not a thing. It should be, but we could talk about that another day. But Shohei Ohtani and Kyle Schwarber were both the finalists for designated hitter for the National League. And there was, like, a big kerfuffle about this, right? Because there's a player for the Atlanta Braves named Marcell Ozuna, and he was supposed to be a designated hitter nominee for the second round of voting, but he didn't make it through, and Kyle Schwarber did, and people got really mad about this. And if you don't know, Marcell Ozuna has a lot of legal allegations against him, and so a lot of people were, like, really mad that Ozuna didn't make it to the second round. And so people were correcting them in the comments. They were like, Ozuna is better in every category that you can even think of. How is Schwarber even on there? And people were like, okay. So Ozuna has more legal allegations against him. And so as a result, they're probably looking like that would be frowned upon if he was representing a team in the All Star game. And I had a great clapback moment. Somebody was like, excuse me, Marcell Ozuna is better at every category than this one guy. And I'm like, yeah, except All Star votes, apparently. So maybe let's just keep it like this. You can be upset, that's fine, but he may be better in every category, but he lost in All Star votes. So maybe you should have voted for Ozuna a little bit more. That would be cool. I thought it was a funny interaction. Another thing that I want to talk about, I just want to harken back to Threat Level Midnight for a second. And I really like sports movies. Like, sports movies are always fun to watch because you get that sense of camaraderie and stuff like that. But a lot of sports movies fall into the category of small budget comedies. There's another name for it, but I'm not going to say it on this podcast just because I want to keep it appropriate. You know what I mean? So small budget comedies like Threat Level Midnight, that's why I'm going back to it. There's a lot of baseball movies, or there's a lot of sports movies that fall into this category just because you want to make a fun movie with your buddies. And so you get some of your buddies together and you make just this really poorly edited, crappy sports movie that everybody ends up loving. I honestly think that people are afraid to make these types of movies anymore because they're not going to be this big, huge, box office smashing, record-setting movie. And so people are afraid of making these smaller budget comedies that are actually like really, really good. Like they're those cult classics that you think of. Like you have a bunch of movies that fall into this category. Like 21 Jump Street is a movie where two cops go undercover at a high school to sniff out like a drug smuggling ring or something like that. Another one that I can think of is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which is a Michael Cera movie from 2004, I want to say. That's the year I was born. That makes me feel a little bit older than I am. But at the same time, that movie has quite a cult following. Like, there are a lot of people who worship that movie. That movie is crazy, but at the same time, it's like anime meets Battle of the Bands movie, and I really liked it, actually. There are some genuinely funny moments from it, and there are some scenes that I do quote quite often. And then another one that I can think of is Napoleon Dynamite. Like, that was a Sundance film, which is a film festival in Utah, and it won, and it was not supposed to be that great of a movie at the time, but it is a cult classic right now. There are a lot of people who love this movie. I really like this movie. Do I think there are some points in it that are completely useless? Yes, but at the same time, it's a funny movie. I just saw a Tater Tot commercial the other day that had a Napoleon Dynamite spoof to it, which I think was actually really clever, just because if you don't know, Napoleon Dynamite takes place in Idaho, and the only mention of potatoes in this movie is tater tots, and it's really, if you don't know what scene I'm talking about, look it up right now. It's worth it. It's totally worth it. You should watch at least that scene or the election scene. That one's pretty good too. And they don't make movies like that anymore. But segueing from that, I wanted to talk about my top 5 favorite sports movies, since a lot of the movies that I like that are smaller budget comedies go into these 5 movies. But I do want to start with some honorable mentions that will not be on the top 5. I wanted to just quickly shout out movies like The Benchwarmers, which is a baseball movie that is funny, but at the same time, it's not as rewatchable as I think it is, and so for that reason, I'm putting it as an honorable mention. And then another honorable mention is Rookie of the Year, which is a baseball movie, again, about a little kid from Chicago whose tendons fuse together in his arm, and he's able to throw faster than a major league pitcher, and it's great. I think it's a feel-good movie, but it's not in my top 5 sports movies. And then another honorable mention that will not be in my top 5, this one is going to sting some people. Remember the Titans will not be in my top 5. I love Denzel Washington. I love all like the camaraderie that they find in it. I just am not that big a fan of this movie. I don't really enjoy it all that much. There's parts of it that I do enjoy watching, but I'm just not a fan of sitting down and watching Remember the Titans. So my top 5 sports movies in no particular order. Number 5, just for the classic nature of it, I have Rocky. So if you have a top 5 sports movie list and you don't put Rocky on there, like, what are you doing? Rocky is a iconic sports movie about someone overcoming adversity and training. Every training montage that you see in a movie is based off Rocky. Like, Rocky is wonderful with its music selection, its sound design, its like playing with the camera, and like they do a lot of montages in those movies. And like Eye of the Tiger was a big thing. Storyline between Rocky and Drago in Rocky 4, which is subjectively one of the greatest movies of all time, let alone let alone just of sports movies. But I put Rocky in my top 5. Like, it's a lot of people's pump up films just because they want to get into the right headspace for games and things like that. But Rocky is up there. And then going off of short names that begin with R, I have Rudy in there, which Rudy is a movie about a kid who goes to the University of Notre Dame and he wants to play football. And he gets denied opportunity after opportunity, and he is constantly overcoming adversity and things like that. And I think I just watched Rudy a couple weeks ago, and it still holds up. It's very good. Number 3 is The Sandlot. I love this movie. It's a movie about a bunch of kids who just want to play baseball, and it's great. And I am constantly hearing quotes from this movie. Like, it's one of those movies again that has like a cult following. Like, people love The Sandlot, and I also just watched it again, and like James Earl Jones is wonderful, and the dog that they got to play the Beast was also wonderful. All the kids are just an embodiment of what it's like to be a kid wanting to play baseball and things like that. Okay, so number 2 then, I have The Mighty Ducks, which is a movie that takes place in Minnesota, which is pretty cool. Shout out to the Bold North, I guess. But it's also the hockey state, so if you had a hockey movie that's not set in Minnesota, like, what are you doing? Like, this is just an opportunity wasted at this point. And they recently made a spin-off series on Disney Plus called The Mighty Ducks Game Changers, which that one is also pretty good. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend checking it out. It's got Gordon Bombay in it, who's the coach from the original Mighty Ducks movies, and it's just wonderful. And then one of my favorite sports movies of all time is Moneyball. I know, shocking, a baseball fan loves a baseball movie, but it's like, I never thought I would root for the Athletics ever, but I watched Moneyball, and I really like it. I really like it. It's got a studded cast too, from like even before any of these guys made it big. I know Brad Pitt's in it. He was probably big at the time, but like Chris Pratt is in it too, which not a lot of people know that, but Moneyball is one of my favorite sports movies of all time. With that being said, I think we're going to jump right into this week's rendition of 3 things you need to know. So number 1, it's Prime Day, you guys. So on the 16th and 17th of July, we have Amazon's yearly set of deals that will put certain percentages off of things and stuff like that, but that's only for Amazon Prime members. So take advantage of those while you can, because they're only here for 2 days, despite the fact that Walmart and Target were both doing their week-long deals the week before. So last week was Walmart Plus Week and Target Circle Week. If you haven't seen the commercials with Kristen Wiig all the time about Target Circle Week, like, it's crazy. They just wanted to usurp all the Amazon customers, because Amazon's been doing really well for themselves with Prime Day. And so if you haven't taken advantage of some of these sick deals, I'm definitely not sponsored by Amazon. I'm not big enough for that. But Prime Day is the 16th and 17th of July. So that's pretty cool. Then, like, again, it's all based on your, like, big savings days, like Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which is, like, online Black Friday now. But you think about it, Black Friday starts November 1st at this point. People are just trying to get you to spend money at a certain place, and so they're making these somewhat appealing deals for you, And I remember back when people had to like camp out outside of stores on Black Friday. Doesn't really happen all that much anymore, just because people wait till Cyber Monday, or they just walk into the store at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and they have plenty of stuff to choose from. But that's a big thing in the world today, is people just want to save all this money, and it's all about that bargain hunting and stuff like that. So take advantage of Prime Day if you haven't already. Number 2, the NBA draft just happened recently. So there was a big headline event going into this year's draft, and it is the question of whether LeBron James' son Bronny is going to get drafted to a team. People say he's not ready, he should go back to USC, where he should just play another year of college, but LeBron has been very vocal about wanting to play with Bronny before he retires, and he only has like one or 2 years left before he has to retire. So the last round of the NBA draft, Bronny James was selected by the LA Lakers. So that removes any chance of LeBron having to leave the Lakers to go play for another team. Well, let's just hope that maybe they can win the final this year or something like that. But with how the Western Conference has been shaping out, you got the Nuggets, you got the Mavericks, you got the Timberwolves who are on the rise. Shout out to Minnesota. We finally have a good sports team. You could just like hope that the Lakers will build around LeBron for one last push to get a championship with LeBron and maybe Bronny too, depending on, he's not going to start. He is an unproven player who definitely, like, if you ask me, should not be playing, but at the same time, he could be like a Luka Garza of sorts and just play for a couple minutes every game when they're blowing out other teams. So you got that going for you a little bit. But Bronny got drafted, you guys. That's kind of crazy. And then number 3, DreamWorks just announced that they are going to be releasing a Shrek 5. And Eddie Murphy also, in an interview about Beverly Hills Cop, the new movie that he just put out, that they're making a donkey spin-off too. So we're on the lookout for 2 new additions to the Shrek franchise, with Shrek 5 coming out in July of 2026, which is 2 years from now. So they've been in production on this Shrek 5 for a little bit, but when you think about it, we haven't had a Shrek movie in 14 years, but who knows? Who knows what's even going to happen with that, right? Because a big debate that's been rising is Shrek 5 or Toy Story 5. Which one's needed? Which one needs to be there? I think with Toy Story, they don't have much of a story left to tell, right? So everybody thought that Toy Story 3 was like a perfect ending, and the perfect ending to the perfect trilogy. And then they had Toy Story 4, and they were like, okay, that's a nice epilogue, right? But it wasn't really needed. We didn't really need that one. And so with the Shrek movies, on the other hand, you're dealing with fairy tales, right? So you always have more fairy tales to pick and choose from, but it doesn't mean that you have the story to go with it, which, like, when you look at the world of like the Puss in Boots spin-offs, which Puss in Boots The Last Wish is like one of the greatest movies in all of animation, but that just goes with the times. The first Puss in Boots movie was not that great story-wise, and I think that's why it lacked a little bit. But there's going to be a Shrek 5, and I'm kind of excited to see where they go with this one, just because they've already, like, Shrek already has a family, and I don't know if he's going to have to deal with being a parent or things like that. But the Shrek movies always do end up being really funny, and so I just hope they can get a lot of the main cast back, and that would be great. But On the Donkey spinoff, however, they already have a Puss in Boots spinoff. You don't need a Donkey spinoff. We already know what happened with Mater and Cars. Cars 2 was all about Mater, and they sidelined McQueen. But I don't know if they're gonna do well with a Donkey spinoff. I do like Eddie Murphy as Donkey. I do. And then I definitely know some people who have beef with some of the Shrek movies. But I just don't like how studios are just using these notable characters to make movies that aren't that great, and they know they're not that great, but since people see these characters in them, then they're gonna go watch the movie. But at the same time, cash grabs are weird, man. You have all of these different studios that can come up with really, really good original ideas, but anytime they're striving for money to make those original ideas, because original ideas are expensive, then they just crank out another cookie cutter movie just with some level of fan service, some level of star appeal, and they just crank out another one, and people go to see it because it has the name associated with it, and at the same time, it's just not that good. You can sit through it and just go, they just wanted my money, and I gave it to them willingly. But at the same time, I want to be more optimistic. I just want to appreciate the movie for what it is a little bit more, if that makes any sense. But it's hard. It's really hard to do that when they don't really give you much of a choice, right? If the movie's bad, it's gonna be bad. There's no way around that, really. And I unfortunately have fallen victim to cash grabs a lot of the time, just because I have high hopes for things. I try to be optimistic, but at the same time, I'm not always a fan of them, just because I could be doing so many more things with that time, right? A movie is 2 hours worth of your time. That is a lot in today's day and age, and they just keep getting longer. You can kind of tell if a movie is padding because they don't need to have a certain thing. A movie that comes to mind is Despicable Me 4 that just came out. I went to see that with my family, and my family was loving it. They had a good time with it, but I was sitting there, and I was like, this is just a bunch of B-plots stitched together, and they didn't really have much of an A-plot, and it was rushed a little bit. It all happened in the span of 2 days. At the same time, I am kind of glad that was the end of it, just because it was a nice way to cap off the story and the characters and things like that. But it was just a bunch of different B plots, and they were all 5 minutes long, and I couldn't keep track of them all half the time. I would just be bouncing back and forth and be like, who's that? What are they doing? Oh, yeah, that's right. We had 3 minutes of them doing this thing, and now they're doing more stuff with that. But that's my speech for today. I don't like cash grabs, if you didn't know. But at the same time, Shrek 5 could be cool. Who even knows? I am kind of excited just to see what all happens in the next 2 years with everything being out from the writer's strike and actor's strike and things like that, so we can actually make more things now and pay people well enough to make those things. And so I'm just excited to see where all of that goes. But thanks everybody for listening to this episode of For the Gram. If you liked the show or have any feedback whatsoever, you can either DM my Instagram at forthegrahampod, all lowercases, no spaces, or send me an email at forthegrahampod@gmail.com. I really do appreciate any feedback that you guys tell me about the show. It really helps me go into it really helps me better understanding what I can do with it. And so I do take all of your feedback seriously, so thank you so much for that. But that's going to do it for this one, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening.